as oh, okay. Where people are unpredictable in where and when they are. And I find that lack of predictability very challenging for all the typical kinds of working together in collaboration that we really associate, especially with Agile teams. Did you want to say anything, Mark?
No, I think we should probably move along.
Okay. So we wanted to know how much control you have over your work. And there's really a 5-point scale here, but we're not going to do all 5. There's full management control, where you don't have any control over the workspace, the hours of overlap, the communications in the back channel, the team affiliation, collaboration, the flow of work through the team, and how you visualize your work. And then there's full team autonomy all the way on the other side. So if you would, well, Michael, I guess you cannot unmute and talk, but maybe you can chat me. And for the rest of you, how much control and autonomy does your how much management control? Sorry, this is where the late hour is really showing. How much management control does your management have versus how much team autonomy does your team have? And it might be different for all of these.
And I've seen situations where it can be different in different parts of the organization as well, depending on the comfort level of particular management on autonomy. So a few other things I wanted to mention here to kind of boil this down a little bit is it's not only what control you have over your work, but how you control your work. For instance, can you change your board? Can you maybe adjust what you do in your tools? Can you open up a back channel? So for instance, we don't really have a back channel in this presentation because I'm guessing there has been some interesting things that have happened in past Zoom sessions here. And so we've had to lock that down. So we don't have another way to communicate. I'm not seeing any chat right now. I think Johanna is seeing some, and
I have all the power, Mark, as usual.
Yes, as usual. But again, that's a great example of, does everyone have that broad visibility, no matter what time zone they're in, no matter what location they're in? So this is kind of what we're getting to, is how much is controlled by those outside the team, usually management, and what is within control of the team.
So if you are willing,
I'm willing.
If all of, as far as I'm concerned, all of you can unmute and say something. I believe people can do that, right, Mary?
I confirm again.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay.
In my case, I say I'm working for a large group, so mostly leaning toward full management control, but possibility of handling our own flow of work and opening back channels.
Okay. Someone else?
I'm unemployed, so I don't have an answer.
Technically,
Okay.
that's full team autonomy.
I was going to say that's full autonomy right now. Yeah.
Yeah, in my case, I work with different customers, but I guess it depends on how many teams are involved and how much rigor we need for the solution context, right? So if you're working for a rigorous environment, sometimes you need to lock it down a bit more, get a bit more consistency across the teams. Other times it's a free-for-all.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mark. If it's a regulatory environment or cybersecurity, you don't want it to be a free-for-all.
Michael, Go ahead.
I have, this is Louisa. Hi. In my latest assignment, I have absolutely no control. I'm working for government, for Attorney General, but it's not because they want to control it, because sorry, in all my previous assignments, I work for financial crimes, for banking and all that, which is very, very controlled environment theoretically, where I had full, basically, reign to how I am running the meetings, everything, right? And I have a great teams and relations and all that. But the latest one is because they are not doing really agile. They are trying to do agile, but it's not agile. They try to actually to go back to full control, power and control of the resources and of everything. So it's very, very bad situation.
They should read my newest book. Okay, let me just say, Michael said definitely workspace tools was management control in my last role. Also note that often groups are not direct employees, and some of these things are controlled by their management as in a vendor or contract consulting firm, right? When you have multiple layers of management, and management is negotiating with each other, often the teams have very, very little autonomy.
Yeah, so certainly in the diagram here, the more you can get to the right, the better. But as some of you pointed out, it definitely depends on your context.
Doug, it looked like I had interrupted you when you were planning on saying something. Were you going to say something?
No, I just turned my camera on. I was just listening. But I'll answer the question. I work with two different companies, and one of the companies I work with, it's been for many years now, and yeah, I'm not an employee. I'm on contract, and I have a team in Poland, and we have full autonomy. They're trying to replace the product that we support, and they've been trying to for 10 years, and they just basically let us do what we want, and we get to focus on delivering value to our end users, who are internal people, and it's it's what keeps me going. Being feeling that I can deliver that value, whereas I see the other people, colleagues on the sister things that have very little autonomy. So I guess someone says it's contextual, and I totally agree.
Yeah, thanks, Doug.
Thank you. All right. So the real issue about control versus autonomy is it totally exposes culture. And the biggest thing that Mark and I have seen about culture is it's all about what management decides to reward, right? How do we treat each other? What management rewards, and how do we all that stuff is culture. And what I find is that so often people think that resource efficiency, where the work assignment arrives, the first expert does their piece, then they hand it off to the next piece, the next expert, I should say. They do their thing, they hand it off, that next expert does their thing, etc., etc. Finally, you get to finish work. Every one of these horizontal arrows is a potential delay. So everything takes longer in resource efficiency, even though it looks like it should be a shorter time, right? Because everyone is maximally efficient, but it's not. Every person is full up, but the work takes a lot longer. There's all kinds of stuff about flow metrics and WIP, and I believe we have at least some of that in the book, right? Right, Mark?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Too many books since then. And instead, it turns out flow efficiency, where people collaborate, is not only better for the team, but is faster for the work, right? Though the more people can collaborate together, and it does not need to be the entire team, but it needs to be enough people so that they can get the work over the finish line. And that's why that the new normal of hybrid teams, when you don't know when people are working where, that can really prevent flow efficiency.
Yeah, and we actually end up in a very old problem space, which I like to call the micro silo. You have somebody that gets their piece done, but it doesn't mean the product is done, which I think probably several of us have seen that in the past. And this is where I also say remote can amplify, or remote amplifies. So when you have that uncertainty around when somebody's available or where they're at, then you've amplified that problem of the micro silo.
And since this is an enterprise meetup, right? I suspect that Mark expects this also, that the more and more managers in larger organizations focus on resource efficiency, because that's how they get rewarded, right? It's all about the rewards. A lot of behavior is I should say rewards drive a lot of the behavior in the organization. You can tell I'm on the East Coast and my mouth is not working that well. Okay, so we were planning on discussing 4 of the principles of the 8 that are in the book, because we find that when we think about these 4 principles for hybrid, that it's very effective for saying, what do we need to do in our team, right, for us as to be more and more successful? So the first one is establish acceptable hours of overlap. And if you don't have at least 4 hours of overlap, we just have not seen any agility really be able to take hold. We just don't see it. That's because there's very, very little collaboration. You can do all kinds of other stuff, but if you don't have at least 4 hours of overlap, we find it very, very hard for people to really collaborate. So, Mark, do you want to talk to this? Is that
Sure. So there's so there's just very simple ways that you can map this out with your team. And as you can see in the upper left, you've got an entire East Coast team, but they all work different hours. So even if you've got people on different floors coming in at different times, maybe some have children, some don't, then you can get into this situation where people come in at certain times of the day. You see some coming at 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning. Some are taking lunches. The yellow indicates when they're doing things outside the team. So let's say Dave, in this example, might be the Scrum Master, and he happens to be working across multiple teams. I know it's a no-no, but we all know it happens in enterprise situations. Or Polly might be our product owner, and Polly might be trying to work with stakeholders in the middle of her day, trying to block out times to have meetings or calls to reach out to them. But even in that situation, making some simple shifts in their time, as you see in the bottom right, you see the same people, same East Coast, but you see where they've shifted some of their hours. So Polly there at the bottom now spreads her calls out a little bit in the morning, some at lunch, some at the end of the day. Dave actually spread some of his coordination time with other teams, because it happens that this team also coordinates with those teams. So he could spread out some of the coordination, and they kind of pushed it toward the end of their day. Now, notice how the collaboration times changed. So on the bottom right, we've got at least 4 hours where the team is 100% available to each other. They just put those little tick marks. in each of those boxes say, yes, I'm available the whole hour, or maybe I'm available half the hour. And totaling that up very simply, you can see when everyone's available, most people are available. But if you look at the original one in the upper left, it was only 3 hours. And so now just by making some simple changes in schedules, that team has more of those 4 hours of overlap to have stand-ups, sprint planning, sprint reviews, whatever kind of meeting, maybe a design thinking session. So sometimes it could be very simple adjustments. Now you might be saying, yes, this is great. This is all East Coast. If you go into the book, we look at much further spread out teams. But in the interest of time, we weren't going to go into all those variations. But it sounds like all of you have some familiarity with that. In the last company that I was at, we had team members from Germany all the way to Alaska. So very familiar with how this reshuffling of availability can make it easier for the team to collaborate and still not be painful for the individual. So you don't have anybody staying up super late or getting up super early. So sometimes simple adjustments can make a difference. Johanna, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything else to these charts.
No, I'm ready to go on.
Okay.
So one of the things that's very important, especially in hybrid teams, is that you need all kinds of communication options. And we have, when we were doing the research for the book, we realized that there are 2 theories of communication. I find this hysterical, right? What do we do all day? We communicate with each other, and we still only have theories. So there's the theory of rich communication, which is multiple modes of communication, which is what you see in all the stuff in the red. And then there's natural communication, which is the ability for us to see each other's faces. Avatars are not the same as natural communication. And you all know about asynchronous communication and how it's very easy for people to mistake what people say versus how we interpret what they say. Mark, do you want to talk about this back channel?
Yeah.
Because that's
So
really
important. Yeah, so that's an example of some of the multimodal communication. So while you might have real-time video like we have now, real-time audio, you still might need other channels to support your distributed team, even in synchronous situations like this. So I'm curious how many of you might have had situations where there's one person speaking like now, but there might be another conversation happening in the chat. Maybe some of the folks are discussing some related issues to the main topic that's being discussed, or there's some other conversations that are supporting the main conversation. We find by having that back channel, it helps the team coordinate on the main focus of the work as well. The one advantage that I find remote teams have over in-office teams is with that back channel, because it may not be like in Zoom, it might be a separate channel like in Teams or Slack. I find that if your main meeting room disappears, like if our Zoom disappeared, a distributed team can find that new meeting room much faster than an in-office group. If ever of you had to try to switch conference rooms in the middle of the meeting, you've probably experienced that joy.
Yeah. So let me go on to creating a culture of resilience. In the book, we talked about what teams might communicate about, but in hybrid teams, it's really about the context for the entire team and for the individual, right? That it's a combination of both. So we were highlighting workspace control and communication options. I thought we had, yeah. So this is one of the things where we might need many questions for this notion of hybrid resilience. So understanding who is in which locations when, right? That's actually a very big deal. My daughter works in a very small company. I think they're up to 40 people now, right? So a small company, and everybody gets to choose. So some people are only in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Some are in Tuesday and Thursday. Some people are in Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Some are in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, I don't understand this, but I am just her mother. So they all seem to make it work. But I do find that, especially if people don't have access to the visual or the audio, that's really an issue. Mark, did you want to take more of that?
Right. And so actually, Johanna did a beautiful demonstration earlier with, I think, Michael, who has an audio issue. His mic's not working. So Johanna actually demonstrated the buddy system, which is something we talk about in the book. How can somebody in the main part of the meeting, or maybe in the office, partner up with somebody that is remote and maybe can't break in on the main conversation or is having some technical issues. And so this is something we encourage all the time with these hybrid teams, where you don't want to exclude anybody who's remote. And so that's where Johanna was kind of relaying what Michael was saying, because he didn't have audio and we didn't have a shared chat. So she basically gave him a voice. So another thing that I'll mention is tool access, and also go back to the issue of audio in particular. As you're bringing in new team members, you're probably often faced with the question: does everyone have access to the tools that everyone else does, and are they trained on them? So perhaps you're in an environment that uses Microsoft Teams, but you've got a team member that only knows Slack. So you've got to spend some time getting them on board. Ideally, you want that where it's the team's responsibility to do that, and you might have a special onboarding backlog for those situations. And for the in-person conversations, that's usually another sticking point for hybrid teams, where you have that group in the office. Very easy for us to communicate. We're wired to communicate when we see other faces near us. And so having that, resisting that urge to just communicate with those in the office, and making sure you have that equal communication, it's coming up with some communication agreements with your whole team, both those who are in the office and those who are not, depending on what time. Again, how will you communicate that information out through the whole team? And maybe you've seen some other things as well.
Anyone see a circumstance where they would have liked more resilience in their team? You want to unmute and say that, whatever that is, Mary?
Yeah, I have a relatively new team, or a new team to me, and we're struggling to get them to collaborate together. And it's been a challenge. The resilience could be stronger. We're working on building that. So if you have some suggestions, I'd certainly love to hear them.
Okay,
Well,
so maybe go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
So one of the ways sometimes is working with the team on that hours of overlap chart, and just getting a sense of when are you available and when are you not, and that'll start with setting some expectations with everyone. Okay, when can we reach out? When can we meet? Another one that we have in the book, and I think I have on my website, I don't know if Johanna has this on hers, is what we call the compass activity. And it's a very simple activity to understand just work preferences in general. And basically what you're you're getting the team to express is, are you quick to move into action, or do you need to be more thoughtful? Do you need all the information, or do you just need kind of a vision of what's needed, and you'll work out the details along the way? Sometimes just by running through that exercise, and it could be 15 minutes, or you could even use it in a retrospective, it can help the team better understand each other, and also understand when people get a little frustrated. Oh, now I understand why you're getting frustrated, because I don't need all the details, but you like to have all the details before you move forward. So just helping to set some of those expectations. And it looks like Gopal has a question as well.
Hey, Joanna, Mark, thank you, first of all. You know, one of the things that I've seen personally is actually two things. One is we are calling it change fatigue, where there are so many changes and people are tired. But that's, let's keep that aside. But the resilience, some of us who are in 100% remote, we actually want to go back and meet people, in person. And there has been a lot of feedback about that as well. So I just want to throw those 2 points out, even though it's, a little bit related, not fully.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
go
I think
ahead,
if your entire team wants to go back, even if you're the only one who wants to go back to the office, go. Right? Don't let us stop you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they don't want to go back fully. They want to go back like once every 6 weeks or once a quarter or something like that.
Oh, let me take that. So Mark and I, when we wrote this book, we actually said to people, we actually wrote down in the book, we don't find that it's often not useful for everybody to stay remote all the time. We highly recommend that people meet at least once a quarter. And then came the pandemic. So yeah. So
and many of the more successful all remote organizations, and I'm talking like Automatic and GitLab that have been remote for a long time, even they get together at regular times, 2-3 times a year. The company, the cybersecurity company I mentioned before, we got everyone together at least once a year, and then teams had the option to get together outside of that. So it would not be just work sessions, but just have lunch or have dinner together. As a matter of fact, the senior VP of product for that organization kind of had a standing order that if you're traveling and you're near anybody else from the company and you want to have lunch with them, you have lunch, send them the bill. And because he understood the importance of having that social connection time. So that can help with the change fatigue, and in a few different ways. One in particular is, and not that it has to be a gripe session, but commiserating on some of the challenges that everyone's facing, and realizing, okay, yes, we're all in this together, and what might we do about that? So it doesn't have to be a retrospective. It can just be a conversation. Keep it light. Well, I'll leave it at that. So you might have other questions or thoughts, or Johanna might be chomping at the bit to jump in there.
well, Joanna is finding it difficult to keep talking, so Johanna would move on. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the last principle we want to discuss tonight, and that's defaulting to collaboration, right? Aside from the various kinds of management issues that you have, and I'm not going to discuss those, but the more you and your team can collaborate, actually, often the more joy you have in the work, and the better the work gets done, right? So if there is a way to default to collaboration, that's even better. We we have many value stream maps in the book, and you will get them with this copy of the slides. I'm not going to go through them all, but this is how you create a value stream map. You start off with a work time above the line, and you say who works on it and for how long, and then if there are any wait times, then you wait until you know the wait time until the next person can start on the work. Then you add all of the work time together, all of the wait time. That's your total cycle time. If you have any trouble estimating how long things will take, cycle time is your savior. Cycle time is what means everything. Okay, that was not English. I think you all know what I tried to say, what Johanna tried to say. But if you have trouble estimating, cycle time is the way to go. I am an old programmer. We used to talk about ideal time. That was the work time above the line, and wall time, all the time it took us to actually finish something. That was our wait time. So if you have if you are wondering why do things take so long, it's partially all the work in progress, but it's partially the cycle time. And you're probably waiting for people because you might not know when they are available to work, and you're probably not collaborating with them, or you don't have the communication tools that you need to collaborate, right? The three other principles that we discussed so far. Mark, do you want to say something about this?
Yes, and you might wonder, those look like columns. Well, those time slices should closely match up to what you have on your board. And if you don't have those, you might want to think about adjusting your board to measure some of those. All right, I'm gonna say it. I wasn't going to, but Jira is okay, but not great at measuring these. Trust me, I've tried to get this kind of information out of Jira. There are some plugins, and I'm not going to go into the details of which one because I'm not affiliated with any of them. But I will say, if you have struggled to get these times out of Jira, I have felt your pain. But if you can just sketch it out as a team, so it doesn't have to be exact. But if you can sketch it out as a team and get these, it still can be a useful exercise. We might want to flip to the next example just so they have a more defined
so
version. Yeah,
this is my optimistic one. Let's go past that. But here's where the team works as experts, right? When people all work alone, you often get this circumstance where somebody asks for code review at the end of a day, and then nobody is available until the weekend. I gave a talk in Dubai about this, and someone from the US came up to me and said, "Why do you include all the weekends?" And I said, "Because your customers still want the feature, right? I mean, they don't stop wanting it because it's the weekend. Your managers still want to know when it's going to be done. They don't care if it's the weekend. In fact, some of them probably want you to work on the weekend. So, I include the weekends. I don't understand how you can actually calculate cycle time without including the weekends. But here's the real key. When people work alone, this is only 10 hours of work time. However, it's 143 hours of cycle time. If you are having trouble with your distributed team or your hybrid team, any kind of a team, cycle time will tell you why it is, right? That will have and notice that Sam fixes problems several times through here, because nothing. I mean, items that you're working on sometimes bounce back. That's the way it is. So, yeah, I think this is just what it is.
Yeah, and also there was even a time where I worked on a U.S. federal program where part of the team was in South Korea and part of the team was mostly on the U.S. East Coast. So these are not exaggerated delay times. These are I think this is one of your teams that you work with, Johanna, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was one of the faster features.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that having those micro silos, that solo work, that's something we all need to watch out for, and how do we shift it more to collaboration.
So we have more of these value stream maps that you can take a look at when we post the slides on Speaker Deck. All is not lost. Hybrid teams really can succeed. We really need to think about the working agreements, certainly about hours of overlap and how you can communicate. Plus, the team needs sufficient autonomy and collaboration. And of course, watching the work, not the people. I missed one of Michael's messages. I find the challenge with hybrid meetings is often cultural more than tools. Even if the remote participants have a presence that's visible to the in-office on-site attendees, their attempts to communicate are often ignored by the in-person attendees. As Mark implied, it seems an on-site advocate for the remote people is required. Yeah, that's why we talk about the buddy
system.
system. Oh, I guess.
Yeah.
Did we call it buddy system?
Yeah, and there's kind of going back to something else I said about the socialization. This is where the socialization can also help. It's not treating people in other time zones as a quote foreign resource. They are people. So how can you get to understand what's important to them? What is their life like? You don't have to share everybody's life stories, but just getting to know them. And sometimes that's jumping on 5 to 10 minutes early to a meeting and say, hey, I'm going to be on the meeting early. And somebody will ask why. And for me, I'll just say to chit chat, to just talk. And believe it or not, people will join and just be curious. And I am an introvert, just to be clear on that. So even I can do it.
Right. All right. So these are all the principles. We strongly recommend. It turns out that if you want more agility, all these principles work. And if you want a successful distributed team, hybrid or not, all these principles work. So we strongly recommend you think about all of them. And we hope that you will stay in touch with us. I have a bunch of links. Mark, I just listened to Dave Pryor's podcast with you and Dave and Jim. You guys have a new course.
Distributed teams class. Yeah. So in that class, Jim Benson, I'm trying to see if I have a copy of it here. No, I have it in my studio. But Jim released a book recently called The Collaboration Equation, which talks about setting up the right environment. It's a great complement to our book on the 8 principles. So that class basically mixes those principles and some of the techniques in that book with Jim's approach of setting that right environment. And so Jim and I have a self-paced course through Modus Institute, as well as we're doing a live workshop, and that was the podcast that Johanna is referring to. If you go to my website, or if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see where I'll share some links on that.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share, and then I can bring this window over here so I'm not looking sideways. What other questions do you have for us? I think I have a few more minutes of a weakness. Or comments or anything.
Doug, do you have something, or Susan?
Design? I don't know if I said your
Yeah.
name.
Close enough. It's Shazia. So you mentioned that it starts 4 hours of having 4 common hours is minimum to be able to work efficiently in distributed teams. But I saw on the diagram that you mentioned a situation, for example, was 2 slots of 2 hours. How do you find the spread of these hours across the day to really affect the ability to collaborate, especially if you have mob programming or different kind of collaborative modeling, etc.?
Well, certainly if the team completely supports mob programming, you'd want to go for more hours of overlap. We're just saying that 4 hours we see tends to be a minimum. And that's not just meetings, that's just opportunities to pair or to mob. Now, I know there are some teams that will do mob programming for several hours. Some will only do it for shorter periods of time. So it may not be the whole day. But when we say that the minimum of 4 hours, that's really for any team, whether you're mobbing or pairing. So hopefully that makes more sense.
Yes, I'm especially wondering if it can actually work if you have people being available 1 hours and not available 1 hours and re-available 1 hour and etc.
Oh, for
So
mobbing, no.
small slots
No.
rather than one large 4 hour slot.
Yeah. And then you want to have that conversation about how can we shift our hours so that we get more of those continuous blocks of time
Yes,
together.
exactly.
Yeah, so that gets back to the working agreements that we were saying earlier. Any other questions? And Johanna, I don't know if you're getting any in chat. So
I'm not getting any in chat right now.
okay.
I've got one for you. Whenever we talk about distributed teams and being in different time zones, like hours apart, North America is a bit different because Canada and the States is a pretty big country, but a lot of times we're talking about like pretty different countries, which kind of suggest pretty significant cultural differences. And even though we're all communicated in English, it's easy to fall into the trap, and I've been guilty of it, of thinking that, well, we're all on the same page, right? But I've worked with customers where some teams are in Russia, others are in Canada, others are in California, some in South America. We're all communicating in English. When you try and make them work together, those cultural differences have a huge impact. So I'm just wondering what your experience is with that and how you've dealt with it. To overcome.
So you're saying that you all speak English, but you're actually speaking a different language?
No, but
I'm joking.
Yeah.
So
like I work with people in Scotland, and I'll tell you that's a very different English.
That it is. Yeah, that it is indeed. In my one, I'll talk for my personal experience, and then I can mention some references. Johanna might have some other ones as well, but for me, I find it helps to just be curious. First of all, be curious about the people. Be curious about when they tend to speak up, why they're passionate when they speak up, or when they don't speak, and be curious about that. I've also found that's where that back channel, especially a text back channel, can be helpful to those of different cultures, because maybe they're a little bit more reserved in their culture. Yes, thank you. I was going to look that up. Maybe they're a little more reserved in their culture, but they're willing to share some information or ideas in a text back channel. So hopefully everyone's seen what Johanna posted if you're not familiar with Hofstede's work, it has there's a wonderful online app there, and it's free of charge. You can basically plug in some of the nationalities that you're dealing with, and you'll get basically some suggestions of the different personalities and how they may show up in conversations and in meetings. And that'll also give you some clues on how to facilitate some of those meetings, as well as things you might want to pay attention to in the regular conversations, and to if you're taking it from a coaching stance, how do you coach so that everyone has level communications. It's also very helpful in speaking to sorry, it's now this is where it's hitting me being late in the night, but it also speaks to how you can set working agreements and particularly communication agreements. Another one, and I'm trying to remember the book. There's Aaron Meyer's book, Culture Trap, but there's another one that came out just before the pandemic, and I'm forgetting the name of it. But I will send that through. I think I have access to the meetup chat, so I'll share some of those books as well. Excellent books if you're dealing with those multicultural teams.
Okay.
So hopefully that wasn't too much, Mark, but I was trying to give you a lot of different options. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Well, and I think it's really important to recognize we are all human, and while some of us are supposedly represent our country, so the US is a very individualistic country, and
Yes.
power distance, yet power distance is something that matters to most people in the US, not to me. Right, I could care less about power distance. I have just as much power as those people who think they're on top of the organization. I am not normal, right? We all know this. It's totally fine. So I think that using this as a guide rather than a prescription can be very useful.
Okay, thank you.
Louise, what's your question?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yes, thank you. It's not a question, it's more a comment to what our colleague Mark asked about. How do you deal with so many, teams, and especially when they are international? So my a previous contract, which was a big, I work on contracts, right, for 20 years. Also with government, I had 8 teams. And one of the teams was from Germany, all architecture and, the heavy stuff, development and all that. Another one in Slovakia, another one in UK, another one in France, plus 4 teams in Canada, in Toronto and Montreal. So despite the fact that in all these big meetings with about 14 architects and all these things, we are building the solution architecture for a huge development. The idea is, and I had to speak in English and French. I'm bilingual, of course. And we had an absolutely wonderful relation for years, right? But the way I did it was I built personal relations with each and every team. So when I would have all this continuously on a weekly basis to build the solution architecture, and there were some political things, but again, everyone was not being stuck by the so-called some here and there political or contracts or all these kind of things, by working together, because I managed to build all this constructive relation in one-to-one, sometimes in their own language or all these things. So I think the collaboration is not so much, it's much more important than actually wherever the teams are located. If you manage to build that human, basically, collaboration.
Yes, and that's an excellent point, and I wanted to build on what you shared or what Johanna shared. There was so I'm in Florida, and I'm in the southern part of Florida. I'll put it that way. And there was a team in Quebec City that were French speakers, but they also were fluent in English, and I was working with them. Most of the time I was flying up there. So this was well before the remote days. We worked together for several weeks. They really enjoy the coaching and the training. The last night I was there, they wanted to take me out to dinner, and they finally said, "We have a confession. When we found out you were from the U.S. South, we were very nervous." I said, "Why is that?" I said, "You're afraid I was going to talk like this the whole time?" I said, "I could have delivered all the training that way." And they said, "No, we're glad you did not do that." Because they had a difficult time understanding it. But the fact that I used some humor and connected with them, it's like I understand the challenge. I wish they had shared that sooner, because I probably would have taken more care. Usually I'm very clear in my delivery, but I would have taken even more care in that case. So that's why I said be curious, and always be curious why somebody's speaking or why they're not speaking, so that you can say, how can I help you in you having a better work environment?
I had missed this, but Michael actually said earlier, Americans and British as two people separated by a common language.
Yes. And I know an Australian fellow that says he speaks 3 versions of English, referring to
Yeah.
American, British, and Australian. Yeah.
All right, I have faded. I am not fading. I have faded. So I'm going to leave. Mary, I know you can. I'm just a co-host, right? So it's okay if I leave?
Let me double check. I'm pretty sure that I'm the host still too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm still the
And I
host.
could,
So you can leave.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you both. It was just really very helpful. So I took all kinds of notes. I can't wait to
Yeah.
dive in.
I will post my slides on my speaker deck. Mark will do his. We'll send you both an email. We'll both send you emails, all that good stuff. Thanks,
All right, well,
everybody.
sleep well. Thank you very,
Enjoy.
very much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you.
night off.
Bye, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thank you for your joining us tonight. We'll see you again soon. Hi, Doug. You're always